1837 BC, 2058 AM. The ancient Egyptian civilization that we have come to know was born in this year with the discovery and excavation of the Great Pyramid. At the flood in 2239 BC, the site of Akuzan, Giza, was buried in sediments, and when the floodwaters receded to the poles with the continental plates now fractured, the Mediterranean Sea covered Lower Egypt. The early coast of Egypt was 108 miles further inland, and this is why the earliest metropolis of the Egyptians was Waset, Karnak, Thebes, and those cities of Upper Egypt hundreds of miles into the African interior. For 62 years since 1899 BC, the geography of Egypt had changed with a quake that elevated northern Africa, lifting the half-buried pyramids and sphinx of the Giza complex out of the sea. This elevation created the geographical anomaly known as the Egyptian Nile Delta, called the Nine Bows long ago. Lower Egypt was the raised land. The Egyptians discovered the gigantic pyramids and immediately attributed them to Thoth, Egyptian Enoch. They excavated the site, removing thousands of tons of sediments, seashells and debris, as others built the nearby city of Anu, called On in the Old Testament and later known as Heliopolis. The Westcar Papyrus relates that a venerable old man who was 110 years old visited Egypt to astonish the king because he knew the number of the chambers of Thoth, which some Egyptologists translate as secret chambers of the primeval sanctuary. This old man claimed to know where the plans with numbers were hidden. He could translate the writings of Thoth. The stranger was a shepherd, and in some Egyptian accounts he was called Philistis. These facts identify this man as Abraham, born in 1947 BC and was 110 years old, who had extensive flocks and herds mentioned in Genesis and Jasher, and was in that same year living among the Philistines at Gerar. Abraham could translate the writings on the lower surface of the Great Pyramid's casing blocks, because Noah had taught him how to understand the antediluvian script. Thoth was a prophet, scribe of the gods, an architect and healer. Enoch. Abraham's presence in ancient Egypt explains a number of peculiarities. Origen wrote that no one among the Egyptians were allowed to study geometry or astronomy until they had been circumcised. This was the sign of the Abrahamic covenant God instituted in 1877 BC, exactly 40 years earlier. Eusebius wrote that Abraham taught the science of astrology to the Egyptians at Heliopolis. Scholars have long been critical of ancient Israelite institutions, finding their precedence in Egyptian traditions and texts, not realizing that the early Egyptian priesthoods were influenced and guided by Abraham. The Egyptian Book of the Dead was originally known as the Book of Thoth, and was also referred to as the Book of Life, or Ritual of the Resurrection of Life. It was said that these writings were originally taken from off the surfaces of the Great Pyramid, which was called the Per-Am-Rid, a name used to denote the Book of the Dead. This Book of the Dead was discovered during the First Dynasty according to 11th century BC coffin texts, which relate that they were found upon a wonderful object, a thing of great mystery, the like of which had never before been seen or looked upon. These monuments in Egypt were called the Pillar of Set, Abraham knowing that they had been erected by the Sethites. The Great Pyramid was finished in 1080 Annus Mundi, 2815 BC, exactly 972 years, 108 times 9 before this date. Abraham possessed a tablet of symbols by which he used to know the past, present and future, reminiscent of the Sumerian tablet of destinies.